Hi guys, I have a little story time, little story I want to read to you while you're working on your Sudoku. This is an introduction to ancient number systems, and hopefully it helps you feel a little better in your mathematical lives. This comes from a book called Mathematics Minus Fear, How to Make Math Fun and Beneficial to Your Everyday Life by Lawrence Potter. All right. So, he likes to start out right at the beginning of life, and he says, let's see just how far we've come. When you were born, you knew nothing. This is not an insult. No one knows much just after they have been born, except that it is a blessed relief to get out into the fresh air. As a result of interacting with the world, you gradually begin to figure some things out. You knew that there is a difference between 1 ants, 2 ants, 3 ants, and 4 ants, even if they were trying to distract you from figuring this out by making funny noises and invading your personal space. But any more than this number of ants, and it was all too much. There could have been 10 of them or 15 of them, and you would not have known the difference. And without any further help, that is as far as the human mind will get in arithmetic. Occasionally, a child grows up without contact with other humans, kind of like a Tarzan situation. Such a person is called a wild child. If they are not discovered early in their life, this is the limit of their understanding of number. Once they have hit puberty, they are rarely capable of improving on this vague sense of the difference between 1, 2, 3, and 4 objects. This is exactly the same stage as the wiliest of animals can reach. Some of the best natural mathematicians are certain species of birds, like the crow and the magpie. If you are one of those people who collect birds' eggs and put them in glass cases with neat labels, please bear in mind this fact to avoid unnecessary cruelty to the poor mother. Don't raid a nest where there are 4 or less eggs, because the lady magpie will know that one of her future children has gone missing. Leaving behind the animal kingdom, there have existed whole human civilizations that have not got further than this. Unlike the wild child, they all developed speech, but in general, they only had numbers for 1 and 2. They could deal with 3 and 4 by talking about 2 1s or 2 2s. But beyond that, the average Batacudan from the Brazilian rainforest would just point at his head and look a bit sorry for himself. This is no comment on the intelligence of the Batacudans. They were perfectly capable individuals. It's just that they had no need for numbers greater than this. There is evidence of our inability to get beyond a concept of 4 all over the place. For example, the Romans only gave normal names to the first 4 of their sons. Then the 5th son was always called Quintus, the 5th. The 6th son was called Sextus, the 6th. The 7th, Septimus, and so on. Similarly, in the original Roman calendar, which only had 10 months, the first 4 months had names unconnected to their position: Martius, Aprilis, Maius, and Junus. But the rest of them were named for their order: Quintilius, Sextilius, September, October, November, and December. Sound familiar, right? Later, January and February were included when it was realized that the months were falling out of step with the seasons, and Quintilius and Sextilius were renamed July and August after the emperors Julius Caesar and Augustus. Now, this is not strictly relevant, but you're probably wondering how a member of the Batacudan tribe managed to keep track of things if they had no concept of a number greater than 4. What happened if they found 9 identical eggs in the nest of a macaw and decided to carry them off home for breakfast? How would they know that they hadn't dropped one on the way back if they didn't know the difference between 8 and 9? Well, the truth is that the Batacudans were perfectly capable of dealing with this sort of thing. They would take a tally. One way of doing this was that for each egg they would pick up a pebble or tie a knot in a piece of string or cut a notch on a stick. And when they got home, as they took out each egg, they would throw away a pebble or untie a knot or cross out a notch. That way they could keep track of their belongings and only ever really deal with the number 1. Each egg was a 1, that they would record in whatever way was most handy. In fact, the most common way of keeping a tally was to use their own body. Each tribe would come up with a particular order for the different parts of the body. So the Batacutan woman would touch the little finger on her left hand when she put the first egg into her pouch, and then the second finger on the left hand for the second egg, and so on until she'd used all of her fingers for the first 5 eggs. For the 6th egg, she would touch her left wrist. For the 7th egg, her elbow. For the 8th egg, her shoulder, and so on and so forth. When she got home, she just had to go through the sequence again as she took out the eggs. If she ended up pointing at her shoulder, wherever she ended the first time, then she hadn't dropped any. This might all sound very primitive, but just to stop you from feeling smug, different methods of tallying have stuck with us through the ages. Up until 1828, so that's only 200 years ago, the British executor sent out tax demands on tally sticks and kept them as receipts in the basement of the House of Parliament. When the system was abolished in 1834, the politicians decided to burn all the sticks. Unfortunately, they lost control of the fire and burnt down the House of Parliament by mistake. Oops. So there you go. At the age of 18 months, you are already at the same level as many civilizations ever reach altogether. As soon as your parents encouraged you to count with your fingers, just like the Batacutans, and to give each new number a name, unlike the Batacutans, you have moved into a place that many inhabitants of this planet have never been. You are a little genius, and it won't be long before you can tell all 9 of your irritating aunts to kindly leave you alone. Getting beyond the number 4 is only the beginning. As soon as you start counting, you bring into existence an infinite amount of numbers. And it is all very well to start giving special names to the first few of them, but you can't come up with new names forever. And even if you did, you wouldn't be able to remember them all. It's a bit like the Romans with their sons. After a while, you give up trying to be original. So the next challenge that you have to deal with is to understand the system that we use to cope with all of these numbers. And the system that most people use is called the decimal or base 10 system. The best people to talk about this are the Tibetans because they stick to it the most completely. The Tibetans have come up with words for the numbers 0 to 9. That's what we call them. Obviously, they have different names. They have also come up with words for every power of 10, as we have for the most part, because we have tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, and so on. Then they can express in words any number they like by combining their words for 0 to 9 with their words for the powers of 10. So they would call the number 324 3 hundreds, 2 tens, and 4 or 4 ones. And there you go. Now you might be thinking with a nationalistic rush of anger that the English language is every bit as logical as the Tibetan. But it isn't quite. For starters, in English, names for numbers get shortened to make them easier to say. 2 tens became 20. 5 and 10 became 15. And there's also the mystery of 11 and 12. They don't appear to have anything to do with 2 and 10 or 1 and 10. Although one theory is that they are different, that is, don't contain any reference to 10, because they are so near to it in sequence. So 11 derives from 1 left after 10, and 12 from 2 left after 10. When we get to 13, apparently we are getting too far away from 10 to cope without being reminded of where we are. And then there's the fact that we just got lazy when it came up to making names for powers of 10. While the words 10, 100, 1,000, million, billion, and even trillion are all commonly used in English, the Tibetans went further. They also have a special name for 10,000 and 100,000. We couldn't bother, which is a shame because it would make writing checks much easier. So we don't claim to be as logical as the Tibetans, but we can claim to be a lot more sensible than the Welsh. They came up with 2 9s instead of 10 and 8. Mathematically, it makes sense. You might have wondered why we count like this, and in doing so, at such a tender age, you once again proved your potential for genius. That is exactly the same question that a fully grown Aristotle asked, and he ranks as one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Why do all men, whether barbarians or Greeks, count up to 10 and not some other number? The short answer to this question is fingers. Your fingers are the most natural tool for counting that you have. At some point, people stopped using them as a tally and started connecting them with numbers. The long answer to the question is, in fact, that not everyone has counted like this. Although the vast majority of counting civilizations has used base 10 fingers, there are plenty of examples of people who use different bases. This may seem surprising. Our numbers and the way that we use them seem so natural that it is hard to believe that they do not just exist in the world that way. But the base 10 system is just one of an infinite number of ways that we could have chosen to put numbers into a system. If you had 8 fingers rather than 10, for example, you would be using base 8 and be just as happy, except you would not be so good at playing the piano. This book is silly. This is not just a hypothetical situation. Besides base 10, the most common number system is the vigesimal system, or base 20. Excuse me. Both the Maya and the Eskimos used base 20, presumably because they were counting on their fingers and their toes. Although what an Eskimo was doing counting without any shoes on, I don't know, because they usually live in a cold climate. The Mayas make more sense. There are still elements of base 20 thinking around today. If you ask a mysterious stranger in the middle of a windswept English moor how far it is to the nearest pub, he might answer 20 miles and 10, which actually means 2 lots of 20 miles and 10 more. So that's the same thing in the Gettysburg Address when he says 80 and 7 years ago. Score means 20. So that's a kind of a base 20 system. The word score for the number 20 has been used since biblical times, when the average human lifespan was said to be 80 years and 10. So 80, so that's 3 times 20, which is 60, and 10, 70. The word comes from the old method of keeping a tally. When you got to the number 20, you made an extra large cut, or score, in your counting stick. Similarly, if you ask a Frenchman for 80 onions, because, in math we do that, in his surprise at the strength of your need for his national vegetable, he raises his eyebrows and says, 80, which he means is 4 20s. Both of these people are using a base 20 system. Just as base 10 developed from counting on the fingers on both hands and base 20 from fingers and toes, a base 5 system developed in several civilizations through people counting on just one hand. Let's see, I'm going to skip a little bit because I'm not super worried about a base 5 system. Anyway, the ones that we are going to talk about that have different base number systems, we will talk about the Mayans, which was base 20, as mentioned. And then the ancient Babylonians, which is another ancient number system, is actually base 60. And it's because of them that our time are 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute are that way. That's base 60, and that comes from the ancient Babylonians. So we're going to have fun in the next couple days learning about all of these different number systems.